Hello, this is Brett with WIPDeveloper.com. Recently I was asked about using the SFDX Visual Studio Code extensions to develop against a sandbox or a non-scratch org. And the SFDX Visual Studio Code team has put out a walkthrough on how to do that. But if you follow the directions, there might be some questions, so I was just going to do an example setup real quick. I will provide a link below for the documentation where this is described. To get started, you have Visual Studio Code open, you open up the command palette, and you use the command SFDX create project with manifest. The first time I tried this, I was a little confused because I didn't have a manifest yet. I thought that meant you had to have the manifest at the time of creation. What it actually is doing is it's creating the project, and it also creates the manifest, so you don't have to worry about that at this point. You just choose create project with manifest, give it a name, I'm going to call it test org, and then choose a location. It's going to go in my documents. Wait a moment while it generates the project. You can see one of the folders is manifest, and in there is a package.xml. You don't have to necessarily customize this if you're just going to be, doing some basic Apex development. It has Apex class, Apex component, Apex page, Apex test suite, Apex trigger, aura, and static resource. These are the basic things you're probably going to need if you're going to do some development in Salesforce. Now we would authorize our org by going to opening the command palette and going to SFDX authorize org, and then choose the type of org you're going to authorize against. I'm going to use the production login since I only have a developer org, no sandboxes for me. And I will use VS Code org as the name or alias. Now, what it did is it opened a web browser, so it's asking me to log into my Salesforce org, and I will do that with I will log in. Now it's going to ask if this is allowed. I'm going to say yes, because I want the CLI to access the org. And I did call it the CLI because it's the CLI that is doing all the work. The Visual Studio Code plugins are talking through the CLI to the org. If you look in the output here, you can see that we can make it, the org has been authorized, and we may now close the browser if we want to. The next step would be to retrieve our source code, or retrieve the source from the org. So here we will right click on the package and retrieve source in manifest from org. Now what this is going to do is going to get anything that is in the org and put it in the Force app. I don't think I have anything in the org, so there won't be much to see. Yeah, it's empty. No results found. This would have been more dramatic if I had at least one Apex class. Speaking of an Apex class, though, we can go and now create an Apex class. I'm going to call it test. It's going to create it here, but I want to make a folder for it. I'm going to make a classes folder. And now everything is in the wrong spot, so I will move the classes folder up to default. I will take my test classes and move them into classes. Now I have some Apex that I can deploy to my org, and I can do that by right-clicking and choosing deploy this source to org on the folder, or in the file itself. Right-clicking the file over here and choosing deploy this source to org. Right-clicking on the folder and deploy this source to org. And I believe that goes all the way up. So I can go to here and choose deploy this source to org. And one thing you got to be careful of is if there's more than one person working in an org, you can overwrite the other person's changes because there is no check to see if there were changes on the server. I get a little paranoid, so the project that I'm using the Salesforce DX with Visual Studio Code extensions on, I'm only deploying one file at a time because I don't want to mess up anyone else. Until a better workflow, if you have a better suggestion, feel free to reach out. You can find me on Twitter, BrettMN, or send an email, brett@wipdeveloper.com. For right now, let's deploy this to org. Let's deploy this source to org. See the line that acts like a spinner. It says it was successfully deployed. Now earlier we retrieved the source from the org, but there wasn't anything to get. So I'm going to delete the class folder. Just delete it off the hard drive. Now if I were to choose the package.xml and retrieve this source, retrieve the source in the manifest from the org, it's going to pull the class that we just deployed back down. One thing to keep in mind is if we already have a class, it will override it. So be a little careful with that. And now we have a classes folder with our test class. And just going to add something misspelled in here. Now I saved it, but I didn't deploy it. So if I retrieve this source from the org, it's going to get rid of my something. So something to be aware of, that my something is now gone. But you can use this to start working in a sandbox using the Salesforce DX extensions. That's all for now. Remember to sign up for the weekly stand-up, and you can get updated with any new information we have on wipdeveloper.com.